Hello and welcome to the African World. I'm Kwame Clement reporting.
And I'm Welma Red. On the program today, Mauritius celebrates 46 years of independence.
My wife and I have the great pleasure and honor to welcome you all this evening on the occasion of the 46th Independence Anniversary of Mauritius.
Also on today's program, the Corporate Council on Africa celebrates excellence by Africans and honors young Africans who are making their mark in the world of business.
We're doing this because we think that the United States needs to see the quality of business leadership in Africa.
Finally, we present part 2 of our recent interview with the South African ambassador to the United States, Ibrahim Rasool. This time, we look at, among other things, recent developments on the African continent. But we begin with the celebration of Mauritius's independence anniversary. Mauritians in the United States celebrated their 46th independence anniversary recently with a reception at the residence of the Ambassador of Mauritius to the United States, His Excellency Sumdut Soberong. The reception was attended by members of the diplomatic corps in Washington, D.C., and Friends of Mauritius.
I was delighted to be able to come.
Thanks for being so late.
The United States of America. The Republic of Mauritius.
In brief remarks, Ambassador Soberong spoke of the immense economic strides his country has made in less than 50 years of independence.
The challenges facing Mauritius were immense at the time we acceded independence, and a few of them were a population growth rate of about 1.8%, a monocrop economy of 250 years of colonial-based rule on sugar, a GDP per capita income of about $380, a polarized, multicultural and plural society. That is when we acceded independence in 1968. Our leaders, in particular the late Rasool Gulam, the first Prime Minister and father of the nation, saw the opportunities in the challenges and decided to move forward. Today, 46 years later, in 2014, the population growth rate has reduced and is about 0.2%. The economy has been diversified. Tourism, manufacturing, textile and apparel, particularly, financial services, ICT, hospitality, knowledge, free education at all levels, primary, secondary, tertiary levels, free health services, pension benefits of all kinds, widows, handicaps, elderly, and you name it. Free transport for students and people older than 60 years. Mauritius in 2014 is cited as a model of peaceful coexistence and economic success.
Noting that tourism is a major pillar of his country's economy, Ambassador Soberong invited his guests to visit his island nation, about which he said Mark Twain, the noted American writer, made this poignant remark.
And he wrote, God created Mauritius first and then copied heaven after it.
The United States Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, spoke of the strong ties between the U.S. and Mauritius.
Among the things that Mauritius, small island state, and the United States of America, almost a continental state, I think that one of the ties that binds us is the commonality that we have as multicultural, multi-ethnic, pluralistic countries in which we not only tolerate differences among our peoples, but in which we indeed celebrate our diversity.
The outgoing ambassador of South Sudan to the United States, who also spoke at the program, told guests of the uniquely sisterly gesture Mauritius extended his newly independent country upon its admission to the United Nations.
When South Sudan became independent 2.5 years ago and joined the United Nations, we did not yet have a pole where we could raise our flag. Guess what? Sisterly Mauritius pulled down its flag and donated the pole for South Sudan flag to be raised.
The ambassador of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Faida Metufu, presented a gift on behalf of the African Ambassadors Group to Ambassador Akek Kok, who is ending his tour of duty in the United States.
It's our great pleasure to bid you farewell and to present to you a token of our appreciation.
With the speeches done, guests mixed and mingled and dined on a wonderful Mauritian-inspired meal.
I'm Kwame Clement. We'll be back in just a moment.
The Corporate Council on Africa recently held its Celebration of Excellence program, at which several African entrepreneurs, most of them young, were honored for their achievement in the world of business.
I think you'll agree with me that the honorees honor us far more than we honor them by their presence to come so far to be with us, to accept it as an extraordinary honor to share the night with all four of you. The issue is that there are far more leaders just like these four throughout Africa. We need to make those connections. We need to join, become partners, not only for the sake of Africa, but for the sake of America.
They included Kachawa Kiuna of Kenya, who heads TransCentury, a business with presence in 14 African countries that is involved in transportation infrastructure and building power generation and distribution equipment.
On behalf of the Corporate Council on Africa, it's my honor to present the 2013 Africa Business Leader of the Year Award to Dr. Gachao Kiuna. The PhD, age 24. And you can see he's at least 27 now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a great honor. I think we have a wonderful future ahead of us in terms of all the opportunities that are there on the continent.
Among enterprising Africans honored by the CCA was Mek Khalfan of Tanzania. Mek, who holds a degree in computer science from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, designed and marketed an innovative cell phone charger called the Puku.
Mr. Khalfan is co-founder and CEO of POOK LLC, a New York-based company that is revolutionizing the mobile charging industry with high-quality, beautiful, and sleek devices, portable chargers.
During Hurricane Sandy in New York City, we lost power 7 days there. We both have 2 phones and 2 tablets. I don't know why, but we had to keep them charged. So I say that I'm going to create something.
Martha, who holds an MBA from the University of California at Santa Clara, is the executive chairperson of a multi-million-dollar venture with vast holdings in the hotel, oil, and banking sectors in her native Namibia.
It's my great pleasure, on behalf of the Corporate Council on Africa, to present Martha Namanjibo Tilahun with the 2013 Africa Business Leader of the Year Award.
I dedicate this award to the African girl child, and it is my long and hope that this will be a humble encouragement to African girls and young women to pursue a career in entrepreneurship and business leadership.
Jervis Kirfak Jondo, the founder of EcoBank, one of the largest banks in Africa, who also is currently the chairman of the Africa-based A-Sky Airlines, was also the recipient of the CCA Celebration of Excellence Award.
I've been knowing this man for more than 30 years, and really, he's a giant. He's a legend in Africa because he's the real incarnation of the private sector and a strong believer in the regional integration. And EcoBank from scratch, he did an amazing champion, African champion, all over the continent. And ASKY, the regional airline, I remember spending time in hotel rooms with him and saying, oh, it's tough. He said, no, we're going to do it. Don't worry, we're going to do it.
The Celebration of Excellence Award came at a major milestone of the CCA, which last year celebrated its 20th anniversary. Paul Hinks spoke of the significance of the awards ceremony and the larger message it sends about Africa.
CCA has this year consolidated its position as the leading organization of its kind in the United States, and perhaps worldwide, with the exception of China. The focus is on Africa, and its continued growth in 2014 will let us move to another level.
The keynote speaker, Barnaby Benjamin, Foreign Minister of South Sudan, spoke about the immense promise and opportunities presented by Africa's newest country.
South Sudan, we call it, is the virgin territory of Africa. I know we may not export here planes or cars, but I can guarantee there are some beautiful carvings you can get from Africa. Beautiful textile. Leave the big one, which is the oil we have. Leave the others, the diamond. Leave the gold. And South Sudan is your friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our hosts, the Corporate Council on Africa, for bringing us here together.
I've been a part of CCA since about 2002, so for me, it's just to have seen it grow and grow and grow so much over the years. It's amazing.
It's a win-win for everybody.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
January 1993. Newly inaugurated President Bill Clinton appoints Ron Brown as the first African-American to head the United States Department of Commerce.
He was the perfect Commerce Secretary.
He invested so much time and energy in Africa.
Perhaps the greatest testament to Brown's investment in Africa is the Corporate Council on Africa, the CCA, the leading American trade group focused on U.S.-Africa business relationships. One of Brown's first acts as Commerce Secretary was to spearhead the formation of the CCA with a small grant from USAID. His premise was simple. Private sector-led trade and investment, not aid and grants, was the key to Africa's development. And the CCA was to be the leader in fostering mutually beneficial trade ties between Africa and the United States, exposing U.S. businesses to investment opportunities in Africa and helping to open U.S. markets to African imports. Now, the CCA can look back at some historic milestones as it has worked over the last 20 years to fulfill Brown's mission. In 2003, as the organization celebrated its 10th anniversary and hit full stride, President Bush chose its 4th biennial summit as the forum for a major speech to announce his Africa policy. That summit was fittingly attended by heads of states from 17 African countries. Also in 2003, the CCA organized the first AGOA Private Sector Forum in Africa, attended by more than 900 persons in Mauritius.
The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act.
Africa would welcome the CCA back in 2007 as the organization held its first summit outside the United States in Cape Town, South Africa, with U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson as the keynote speaker. By now, the CCA was the go-to organization for U.S. policymakers and leaders for advice on trade and other matters pertaining to Africa. President Bill Clinton would invite the CCA to join his business delegation to Nigeria in 2000. In 2009, another Clinton, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, would headline the CCA's 7th biannual summit in Washington, D.C. More recently, the CCA hosted President Obama and President Kikwete of Tanzania at a meeting of more than 200 African and American business leaders during President Obama's 2013 visit to Tanzania.
Our gratitude to President Kikwete and the people of Dar es Salaam and Tanzania for their incredible hospitality. Thank you to our hosts, the Corporate Council on Africa, for bringing us here together.
During that trip, President Obama announced his Power Africa initiative.
Power Africa, to double access to electricity here in Africa. This facility was idle. With the support from the Millennium Challenge Grant, General Electric, and Symbion, they got it up and running again.
It noted a role for the CCA as the private sector leader in bringing that effort to fruition. These historic milestones apart, the CCA can proudly look back at 20 years of being at the center of a remarkable growth in trade and investment between Africa and the United States. The facts and figures speak for themselves. In 1993, when the CCA was founded, total trade between the U.S. and Africa stood at $24.2 billion. Today, it is more than double to $67.3 billion. During that period, Africa export to the U.S. increased from $14.7 billion to $41 billion. Certainly, many reasons account for this spike in U.S.-Africa trade, but the CCA, with its many Africa-focused trade-related programs and growing membership, has been right in the mix of it all.
The organization does represent about 85 to 90% of all U.S. private investment.
Membership in 2013 has been the largest increase in any year in the history of CCA.
The CCA is certainly poised for another 20 years of being in the forefront of promoting a win-win approach to investing and doing business in Africa.
And now we go to Kwame Clement in part 2 of an interview with the South African ambassador.
Hello and welcome back to the African World. I'm Kwame Clement reporting. Our guest on the program today, His Excellency Ibrahim Rasool, Ambassador of the Republic of South Africa to the United States. Welcome back to the program, Mr. Ambassador.
Oh, thank you very much.
Let's talk economy a little bit. South Africa is still the leading economy on the continent of Africa by any measure. But you are beset with some problems, that unemployment, particularly unemployment, and which in part I think can be explained by the downturn in in the global economy. Tell us about what your government is doing, its policies to stimulate the economy and create those vitally needed jobs for the young people of South Africa.
South Africa's economic position on the African continent is really that it is still the largest economy by output, even though there are growing economies on the west coast of Africa in terms of output. But South Africa remains the most diversified economy ever on the African continent. It exports, for example, 2,000 products to the United States under AGOA, as compared to 3 or 4 products that its nearest rivals on the African continent is able to export. But in that is its problem. Because it is so integrated into the global economy, when there's a global downturn, South Africa feels the effects. We've lost over 1 million jobs because of the slowdown in the European and the American economies. And our growth rates have gone down from 5% to about 2.5% over the same period since 2008. So our global integration is our Achilles heel at this moment. And so our government has understood that it needs to be able to respond not by cutting itself off from the global economy, but by being more valuable in the global economy. And so our National Development Plan, our new growth path, is put squarely on value addition, on beneficiation. We are not happy any longer to simply export gold, diamond, platinum. We want to turn gold and diamonds into jewelry. We want to turn platinum, for example, into car parts. We want to be able to be a manufacturing hub that can make itself indispensable to the global economy. So that's the core of it. But before we can reach that goal, we've got to reach another goal, and that is to reform our education system. I think we've simply met our quantitative objectives in terms of schooling. We've got our optimum number of universities. We've got all our primary school children in class. We've got the bulk of our high school students in class and so forth. We now need to teach them the skills that will make them competitive globally and fuel the South African economy. So I think that is absolutely critical. The third thing that we need for South Africa to become whole again is to reduce our dependence on European and American markets and develop our markets with BRICS. And hence, I think China, Brazil, Russia, and India become absolutely critical partners for us, but also to ensure African integration, so that the 10% intra-Africa trade improves tremendously, and that South Africa stands at the head of that. And that's why we are spending so much time on African integration, because that's where the market of the future is for South African goods. And for us to do African integration, we've got to get infrastructure right, not for South Africa only, but for the African continent as a whole. That's why our president is leading the North-South corridor with rail and road, with ports development, with airport development, and so forth, so that the preconditions are in place for South Africa's revival. If those 5 factors come into play, then I think we begin to see the real revival of the South African economy.
Talking about African integration, Mr. Ambassador, for a long time, things seem to be going relatively well on the continent. But then all of a sudden, we've got these bad news. Central African Republic, there was Mali, there's the perennial problem in Somalia. I know the AU has its policy that rejects people who come to power by military means. But what does this say about the continent?
Just as even President Obama has to invite the African heads of state to Washington for a US-Africa summit in order to plan the next phase of economic development, just as we are the second fastest growing economic region in the world, with 6 of the 10 fastest growing national economies in the world on the African continent, we get Mali, we get Libya, we get Central African Republic, we get Eastern DRC. I think the West must take a lot of responsibility for this last wave of instability and violence that have hit the African continent. Africa warned them about going into Libya without understanding the dynamics of Libya, of overthrowing Gaddafi without securing the mercenaries, the army, and the weapons. Today, the rebels can't get control of Libya. No one knows what's happened to the arms. No one knows where the mercenaries have gone, but we see the fingerprints. The weapons that have left the barracks in Libya are finding their way to Somalia, to Central African Republic, Northern Nigeria, Mali. And so I will want to say to them, you must bear responsibility for not listening to the African Union when it said to you, regime change is not on the agenda. We must move in there, stabilize Libya, negotiate a settlement, and be able to do all of that while we protect the citizens of Libya. When you excuse a coup in Egypt, how can you condemn a coup in the Central African Republic without being hypocritical? For what has gone out on Africa is that coups are back in fashion. And the West will turn a blind eye if you can persuade them that you are doing this in the ultimate democratic interest. And so it is absolutely sad that at the moment of Africa's greatest promise, we have opened up a Pandora's box and we have put on the agenda what we thought we had taken off the agenda forever. And I think that we need a strong African Union that is able to assert an African agenda over all of these matters so that Africa does not become fair game for former colonial or new colonial powers to really take over.
You took up assignment here in 2010. If everything goes according to your country practice, you have about 4 years, done 4.5 years, and you soon will be leaving this place.
Let me say that I first have unfinished business in the US. I've just had, and you're the first one I'm telling this, just had my term extended until December, and I think that the unfinished business for 2014 is that I need to make substantial work to retain AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunities Act for South Africa. Secondly, we've got to make the August Africa-US Summit a successful one, and I'm hoping our president will be one of the leading figures while here. In the meantime, I'm working nights and weekends to complete a book.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
No, it's been great.
Ibrahim Rasool, Ambassador of South Africa to the United States. I'm Kwame Clement for the African World. Thanks for viewing. We'll see you next time on another edition of the program. So long, everybody.